do have a very special thing to do first, and it's for me to introduce a representative from the Virginia Stage Company. If they would come forward. We're delighted to have you here.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am here today at the bequest of Jake and Otto Wells, the brothers who brought to Hampton Roads the Wells Theater 100 years ago. This beautiful piece of history and this beautiful piece of Norfolk's history has been home to the Virginia Stage Company for more than 3 decades. And now the Stage Company is celebrating this momentous anniversary with the Centennial Affair on April 26th. This amazing evening will honor Norfolk Southern, a company that has supported the Wells and the arts from the very beginning, and will feature dining under the stars in the Tazewell Street Ballroom, one-time only full production of 100 Years of Future Past, live and silent auctions, all culminating in a risque romp with an after-party to be remembered or forgotten. And so without further ado, Mr. Mayor, is your invitation.
Well, wow. The risk ain't all.
All join us on April 26th.
Aren't you the lucky one?
We thank you very much for coming over. It's very nice of you to come.
They want to remember the forget part.
Sounds like they got your
We're delighted to have you.
Hi, Brad, you want to be filmed too?
All right, we'll go ahead and get started on the interfinancial statements now. Patty, we're glad to have you here.
Thank you. We're here once again to give you a monthly report on the city's actual financial statements for fiscal 14. And you all received the book, and there's a lot of detail in there. And we will not go into all of that detail today, but we will at least go over a few things. And I'm supposed to do this. We're going to go over the general fund expenditures, revenues, and then, what's on the agenda moving forward. This schedule, this table is just really a recap. If you don't want to look at anything else, you can see that we have a revenue budget of $982.8 million, and we've actually collected through February $480 million. We still have $502 million to collect. Expenditures, we have an expenditure budget of $1,041.3 million, and we've spent $692.6 million. The difference in the two is expenditures funded out of fund balance, which is primarily the school reversion and the capital projects. The next chart is just what you see every month. It demonstrates sort of an elongated S-curve, how we collect our revenues. And you'll notice that the last 3 months of the year, you see a huge steep line because that's when most or a significant amount of our revenues for the year come in. Our average at this point in time is usually 49.2%. We're a little bit behind our average at 48.8%, and that's primarily personal property and sales tax revenues is behind the trend line. And just as a reminder, we still need to collect 51.2%, and tax relief for the elderly has been posted at 14.7%, which is a little less than normal. And we're still on a couple months lag. Business license is due this month, and you'll see in a few minutes, though, that the revenues for business license coming in very well. We checked postings as of 2 days ago, and we are almost made budget today. So we fully expect that we'll meet or exceed the budget on business license, so that is an extremely good sign. The second installment on real estate is due June 5th, and that is pretty well easy to predict. What's not so easy to predict is the annual personal property taxes due June 5th, and that was budgeted at $85.2 million, the local portion. So we'll talk in a few minutes about, as Catherine Whitesell has mentioned, this is not likely to make budget. Just going to go through some of the major revenues the way we normally do. We put a little bit more information here because with the recession, I think it's helpful to look a little bit earlier than the recession. And the dark blue lines are what the actual annual collections were. The yellow is this year's budget, and the light blue is actual collections through February of each year. And we've got the real estate tax rate down here at the bottom. We are exactly on trend. We've collected less money, but we are exactly on trend, so because of the real estate tax rate being reduced. Personal property, kind of looking back to 2008 and seeing how it gradually goes down, bottomed out, it looked like in 2010, and kind of bouncing around. The yellow bar for the current year, and just looking also at the year-to-date collections, we are just a little above last year. That's primarily delinquents being collected. The bills have not gone out. Early signs are that this will be short. This source will be short. The Commissioner of Revenue is preparing his billing. He can't do the business personal property because he uses the business license to help him do that. So that's in progress now. The general sales tax. This is doing pretty well. In fact, we got the posting for March, which is not on here yet. Right now, we're 2.3% greater revenue than we were the same point last year. When we get March in, we'll be 2.4 above. And looking at some of the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission projections, Virginia Beach's revenue trends on sales taxes has been much more consistent. We haven't seen the drop that we've seen on a regional basis. The budget for general sales taxes is 5.5% greater than the actual was in 13. So this one, it's a little early to tell, but it may not quite make budget. It'll be higher than last year. Because we starting last year, well, actually in 2012, we exceeded 2008 sales tax revenues. In 2008, we looked like that was the peak fiscal year for us. May not have been, within there was a peak month, but the fiscal year was, of 08 was the peak year. Utility taxes, this one is extremely stable revenue source. When you see ups and downs like you see with the red bar, that's going to be timing differences. The way the tax is assessed, it shouldn't be any trouble in making the budget. Telecommunications tax, we've seen this revenue source consistently go down. See this, so far this year, the blue seems to keep dropping each year, and that's when the state's been taking it over, and that revenue source has seemed to be allocated less to Virginia Beach. Some people think are reporting that the drop in landlines is part of the driver there, but that's 3.6% down from last year. And so the budget was increased from what we actually collected last year. Business license, through February, the revenues are up, and I've just reported to you we're about $1.5 million less than the annual budget as of last week. So we fully expect to see this. Great sign of our local economy. Hotel room taxes, this is the general fund. We showed a little more bars so of the prior years. See that we've consistently been staying pretty high even through the recession. The budget of $6.1 million is pretty high, so we see the red line going downward. There could be a slight chance that we will not get to budget. Even though the actual is greater than last year, the budget is assuming an even greater increase. Total hotel room taxes citywide budgeted at $27.4 million. Our actual collections so far this year are pretty much on target with last year. While we're showing a tenth of a million difference, that was a rounding. The difference is really very small. It's fairly flat year to date. Just as a reminder, the way the hotel tax we divide amongst funds, the tip fund getting 5%, 5 of the 8, general fund 2, tap fund 1% plus the dollar room night, and then we have a small slivers going to the Central Business District and the Sandbridge. A little more history as well on the restaurant meal tax and how that's performed consistently with these dark blue lines continually right through the recession. The budget was increased to 37.1. So it's not clear. We probably need to watch this another month or so, but we may be a little under on that. And the total citywide is budgeted at 58.1 million, and we are just a hair less than we typically would be, even though actuals are higher. Actual monies are coming in, the budget assumed higher amounts. Restaurant meal taxes, again, that's allocated out. General fund getting 3.5% of the 5.5%. Tap fund getting 0.5%. Tip fund 1.06%. And open space 0.44%. So that's split out as well. Just as a recap, some of our revenues, I think we talked about personal property, general sales, hotel, restaurant may be slightly under. There will be some other revenues that will be slightly over. But at the end of the day, this budget probably will not be exceeded on an actual basis the way we have in the last few years. General fund expenditures are under. Our trend line would put us somewhere about 70.6%, and we're at 66.5%. So expenditures are tracking extremely well. And this is that slide that I like to show that says we don't collect revenue the same way we spend it. So hence the importance of a fund balance and working capital. This next chart is just a recap of the annual budget by expenditure type and where we are in terms of expenditures. We've spent 66.5%. And as a reminder, the city, the last few years has between 15 and 27 million has been underspent, and we should be somewhere in that same range this year. And next steps, we'll be back next month to give you through March, and Catherine Weitzel, Management Services, will present the budget this afternoon, so that'll be exciting, and hopefully the budget will be adopted in May. I did want you to know that I did some briefings to the rating agencies week before last, and I used a lot of the same information, and I think that the comments we got back, we've gotten one rating report back from Fitch that we are still AAA. I have not heard back from the other two, but they are very complimentary of these reports, the fact that someone is briefing council on a monthly basis, and the conservative policies that the city follows. So
Very good.
Yeah.
We thank you for the presentation. Questions, John?
If we could go to the personal property tax for cars. I know we don't have it here, but I think what would be interesting to know at a future date, not while we're doing the budget.
Right.
Because we know like the average car now on the road is like 11 plus years.
Right.
But I've never really seen where we've looked at and said, if you're looking at and say, what is the average of the people who pay personal property tax? Mm-hmm. What's the average age of those cars are? And looking at that, seeing, when does that mean the curve come? So you can have an idea of when there's some replacement rate. That would be interesting
Right.
insight to have. Or in fact, it doesn't get there, and that just shows financial stress people are under, and they're even pushing them longer, and that's the idea of health of people individually as their disposable income. And if you go to the restaurant one, I know I've raised this point
Yes,
before.
yes.
Well, our revenues are up, but if you go on the internet and look at the cost of the average meal, and you could just think to yourself when you go into these places and say their lunch was $5.99, now it's $8. So when you control for increase in price of meals, in reality, the amount of transactions is down, but the revenue is up. So it belies really the health of the overall economy. So the revenues are not a reflection of financial health, but more a reflection of escalation and fewer consumption. So we just need to be mindful that those numbers don't tell the story that on the surface they look. That you'd have to talk about what would they be like if you had the same representation, and that's how we get those families' incomes up so they can go out and spend more money.
Right.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank
You know, the calendar that we're on is, there's a high probability you will have your budget before we have a state budget. And since they are their second largest source of revenue for us, it may take some adjusting after you actually adopt the budget, but we'll see. Hopefully the General Assembly will adopt a budget before the 13th of May, but remains to be seen.
About 1 to 30, that's what I've heard.
I sure do thank you.
That's what I heard. They call it a boost budget or something.
That's good. We'll now go to city council comments. Bobby?
Jim, you want to lead off about last night?
I've got two of them. You go ahead.
Okay. Last night, Jim and I had the pleasure of hosting a get-together on the arena where we had the public come out. We had the Citizens Communication Committee, and it was very well attended. It was very well received. I want to thank Rosemary and for Brad for coming out and for staff for doing a great job. We had standing-only room. We had quite a large gallery of people. And we're glad to say that all of the people that attended even, were allowed to participate and submit questions. And from what I understand from Mr. Spohr, the quality of the questions that we got that we're going to be getting back to the public on both the proposals and all of the concerns about parking and everything else, I think are going to really benefit the city and is going to be very transparent.
It was an excellent meeting, and Bobby and Jim did a
Well,
very
I
fine
really
job.
want to thank you both for taking this on, and we appreciate it very much. And all the feedback I've gotten has been very, very good. So I do thank you. Thank you very much. John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I received an email, I think many of you did as well, from Mac Rawls yesterday indicating that the Department of Historic Resources had approved the application to put the Cavalier Hotel on the historic registry, which I think is a big win for all of us, and I think a big success for the action that we took. The second item is that we had the Shamrock Marathon 2 weeks ago, which was a big success. They had another record year. In fact, they had 12,000 runners just for the half marathon component of the weekend, which is actually matches what we do for the Rock and Roll Half Marathon in September. So they've done a real nice job growing that event.
They did a great job.
Of course, my daughter
Careful.
participated in the Leprechaun event with the mayor's granddaughter, and
His daughter came
I
in
think it
second.
was technically a tie, although there is a review of a potential false start on
No competition or anything.
but it was very nice to have everybody there, and it was a great event. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wood?
Well, did you have something, Brad? 'Cause
I did, but he called on you. I was going to default to whatever the mayor wanted to.
Okay, well then Rosemary, then Brad.
Mine just might take a little.
Okay, gotcha.
2 weeks ago, I attended the Local Government Advisory Commission for the Chesapeake Bay in Richmond that the governor has appointed me to. And I just wanted to let all of you know that I was elected to be vice chair, which means I will head up the whole delegation for the state of Virginia.
Well, congratulations.
Right.
We're proud of you.
You're a big deal.
Right.
I was thinking LSU.
Brad?
I just wanted to mention to the group that Jim and I were co-speakers at a professional network meeting last Monday night, a week ago. It was a couple days after your State of the City speech. Jim basically repeated your speech, which left me nothing to talk about. But all joking aside, there's a lot of support out in the business community for your bold objectives, and it really is neat to be on a team that's moving the ball forward.
You're very kind. Other questions, John?
I was up in Richmond on Saturday, and I did see Senator Rob Bell, and that's where I got the information where he said, it looked like the leaning was they were gonna just adopt the budget through the 30th of June. They wouldn't be able to come to agreement in that between there. That's
what I'm hearing.
That's what I'm hearing, so that has some implications, so I just thought I'd share that, but that, I've heard it from some other places, but he said it out publicly in the record, so I don't mind quoting him. But that's what he said, that was the likelihood that that's where we would be at.
That's just a tremendous help to us.
And the 160 small towns and 35 cities, and then all the counties.
Thanks for the good news, John.
Any other questions or comments?
Until I got.
Mr. Wood?
Well, I kind of wanted to bring things back to talk a little bit about light rail. And it's been right out about a year, just under a year since we've got our first unsolicited PPEA on light rail, to kind of put this in perspective. And it's been about 16 months since the referendum. So I kind of think we need to start taking a look and figuring out what we want to do. So talk a little bit about the options that we have for light rail. And Dave, you have that picture. One of the things that I think we really need to do is take a look at our fixed guideway system potential as a system, as opposed to a simple straight line going from point A to point B, because that is not a system, and that's not what we want. So I'd like us to consider a couple of options here. First off, I'd like to just to start this off, that the first thing that we would talk about is extending traditional light rail from Newtown Road to Town Center in that general area, which is the blue section right there. You know, it could be the first blue dot or the last blue dot or the first green dot, somewhere in that general area, and look at what the options are for that through the PPEA process, through the traditional design bid build, and see what's the most cost effective for us. And then, and a number of us, John, Lewis, and I, and city staff went down and did look at the maglev and the Virginian Pilots love letter notwithstanding.
You need to get them down there.
Yeah, well, that's a whole separate issue that we discussed last night. But there is certainly an option for doing a meaningful operational revenue service track down at the oceanfront through that. And so, and I see these as basically two separate things. You know, certainly the thing down at the oceanfront, if all goes right in the world based upon what we talked about, this could be something with minimal cost and risk to the city. The traditional light rail, we know what that is, and that's, you know, we could certainly structure a deal for that distance. And Dave, what is that distance from Newtown to Town Center? I can't see it from, is it 2.7? Is that what it is?
7.
Yeah,
That's
so-
to the west side of Independence.
Yeah, so we're looking at, you know, a little bit less than 3 miles running into the city. So we've got a couple of PPEA proposals on this that I think that perhaps we need to take a look at and start maybe looking at a detailed phase for what it would cost to just do that, to take basically separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will, and just you know, get away from the whole maintenance issue and all these other options that were part of some of the other proposals and the consulting deals and all that, and just say, okay, what would it cost us to build it from here to here for the first section, while we're still negotiating on that easternmost section with the alternative technology. So it's just kind of one of the things I wanted to throw out there for discussion there, if we could, and I don't know if we want to discuss it now or at a future time.
Well, certainly I want to dedicate some
something I
time
think
at a
we need
future meeting to go through this, but I do appreciate you getting some thoughts on the table. You know, I must say to you, it does seem logical to me that we go to Town Center with light rail, and at the same time, that gives us a lot of options from Town Center to take on a different type of technology, perhaps, once it's proven. I believe you all stated to me it'd be 5 years for them to get approval from the, is it the FTA?
You know, they've got a couple of places, but
Multiple.
FTA's.
Multiple, but it would take some time to get that if they can, and perhaps at the time we get to Town Center and they've gotten their approval, that might be another option for us. I truly believe that, and I say this as sincerely as I can say it, and it's funny, Louis Jones and I were talking about this several weeks ago, you know, to really have a transportation system in this city, which is what I think we all really, really want, you know, it's just not going to go east-west. It's funny, I was reading in the Beacon, they were going over some historic things, and it's in 1989,
Yes.
we had the vote on light rail.
Yeah.
But you know, I remember, but my point to you is it's not who voted for it or not, but I do remember part of the discussion, and I remember saying it myself. And I supported that motion, but it was going, you know, we needed to go more than just to the ocean front. And at that time, we were talking about it going more than just the ocean front, and that was like rail, of course, at that point in time. But, you know, I really think going north-south from like Town Center is just something that, and really it allows us to go into other cities besides Norfolk if we go north-south. And you get to Little Creek, perhaps even get to the airport, perhaps even get to another city. And obviously, John, something that I know, and we should always make sure that we never turn our back on. Once it gets to Town Center, we got to find a way to get it to the ocean front. Now, is it going to be light rail, or is it going to be maglev, or could it be something else? I don't know, but I certainly appreciate you putting it on the table, Jim, and us, you know, yes, sir.
If I could just add one thing, just to build on what you were saying, Mayor, I think, you know, if you really read the Envision 2040 and you think about that vision, and this is long-range thinking here in terms of that north-south line that's shown there, for example, going up to Little Creek or down to the hospital or TCC or the municipal center itself, that's way out there. But I think we've got an obligation to think that way. If we want to pursue the 3-mile roughly extension out to Town Center as a separate minimum Phase 1 segment, in discussions that we've had with the regional administrator for the FTA, her recommendation was that we ought to include that as an alternative in the draft environmental impact statement that's being prepared right now. If we do that, and we've talked to HRT about that and their consultant about what that would take to do that, it's about a 3 to 4 month process to analyze that as they call it an MOS, a minimum operational segment.
Well, with that advice coming to us, we should do that, I would assume.
Right.
No ifs, ands, and buts about that.
Well, I just wanted to make you aware it would be a 3 to 4 month delay in the draft statement, and that I would need to request that of HRT in a letter, which I'm
The one
prepared to do.
objected that seems like a no-brainer to me.
Well, it does, but do we know what the cost of it would be?
It's already being paid, it's already,
It's already included? There's no additional cost?
Well, there is funding available in the NEPA process to do that, but it's going to cost some
I'm
additional.
joking, I'm just
okay,
wondering.
good point, though.
And I think also, Mayor, when you take a look at this, you know, this is just a quick and dirty, you know, throw in very obvious places where we could go, you know, TCC and the courthouse and up to Little Creek. But I think, you know, if we look more globally when we talk about, you know, our options and our future economic growth, we certainly talk a lot about Princess Anne Commons in terms of, you know, not only sports, but medical R&D and that sort of thing. And, you know, we need to have meaningful transportation going there. The other thing that's not frankly shown on there is Bob's project, Glen Haven 11. You know, Glen Haven 11 is going to allow you to go all the way to Greenbrier Mall from Virginia Beach. So
That's in another city.
so if there, you know, and that would certainly be a potential option there. And I think ultimately the thing that we need to remember is that even though it's a small start with that 2.7 miles, you know, the FTA regulation or what they look at is a system or a track of independent utility between two logical termini. And I think there's obviously no argument that Newtown Road would be a logical terminus because it already goes there. And then you take a look at Town Center with the thousands of people that frequent that on a daily basis, that would also make it a logical terminus. So I think it's certainly worthy of the additional study. Without any doubt whatsoever, I do not think we should depart from the NEPA process in any way, shape, or form. We need to continue that process because we need to preserve every single option that we have for federal funding and to do that. So any system that we would negotiate with anybody with or anything like that is contingent upon completion of the NEPA process, the LPA, all that sort of thing, and that they would build to, assuming there is no federal money, there's other money that they would build to federal specifications, 100%. So that I just want to make that very clear when I mention these things.
Very good. I have John Moss, John, and then Barbara.
Well, I'm certainly, as Jim knows, in favor of the demonstration project of the technology because I firmly believe that that's a certification that can be achieved. And I believe it, as we talked about before, it's the only scalable system. Anyone who looks at I'll call it the early 19th century, late 19th century, early 20th century technology requires too much land, too much taking. We'll never be able to afford to expand it in the way that we talk about, that you can an elevated system. And so, and for all the money that we would spend going to the oceanfront with a traditional system, we probably can do a lot of what we see that's green there. And I think that's when people see the scale of the same amount of money and what it accomplishes, it's like the no-brainer. But I realize that we got to get there. I think that if we work with them, I think it can be done sooner than 5 years. Gosh, I realize it took us, we did the whole Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel in 44 months, so we ought to be able to do something like that, we would hope. But my hope would be, working with those folks, David Sharp as he is, whatever we did with the arena, that the thing could be open and operational at the same time the arena opened. That would be ideal if you thought about the operational track in terms of the time it takes them to construct it. All I think that's not beyond the scope of possibility. If we thought about it, that's something to achieve.
Adds another radius.
I got to tell you that.
Exactly.
I love your thought.
All right, that's awesome.
I tell you one thing, and I'm about ready to have a heart attack.
We'll get that CPR machine.
Get that so we can, are those things in the budget?
Who knew?
But that's
Jim's
great.
going over his debt service now.
That's like somebody else's money.
John Aaron, I got you next, Barbara.
You're blown away. John Moss said everything I was going to say. We'll go home for the night. This is great.
Did you have anything to add? Barbara?
I would just say that the ITA study says that that area should be planned for the extension of the light rail or the mass transit.
Mass
So
transit.
we've already got a study that recommends that, so I think that's pretty.
That's great.
Pretty neat.
A kumbaya session.
I know.
That's a
love it.
giant kumbaya session.
You didn't know that was in there. They kind of wondered whether they should put it in or not, but they said, well, we might as well. But anyway, that when you also said something about the arena and opening and saying, we keep hearing from folks that how in the world can you talk about all these big projects? And what I'm thinking, and I know we talked about all of this at our retreat and what our priorities would be, but we're talking about some mighty big things with the transportation system, which certainly has to be a system and has to be very important, and the arena, and then we have, all of our other issues that we deal with, and we're certainly looking at, the employees' issues with health care and compression and all that. We've got some really big ticket items that we're facing, and I just would hope that as we go forward, we keep all of these in balance, and we're looking at all of them, and we don't get carried away on one without considering these other things, because we do have to look at the whole thing.
I think everyone will be in total agreement with you on that. Other questions?
I would say, the only other comment I would make is if you take a look at the differing technologies, and I think the logical transfer point would be a vibrant area like Town Center where people would go. I think that would be, in my opinion, would be a much better transfer point than Newtown Road, which is just kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, if we have a potential
Virginia
connection
Beach
there.
Station or Union Station.
Well, whatever we want to call it, Bayside Station, I'm sure it's probably a.
Pogo Station.
There's another
I
redistricting.
like the way that guy thinks.
Actually, it should be Euclid, that's what was the
I would
before.
point out that
Name it the
during the
Jim Wood
redistricting, Lynn Haven lost a good bit of Town Center, and Bayside somehow got a lot of it. But it's actually it is a logical place really where people would get off and would get on and that sort of thing and transfer. And I think it just intuitively makes more sense to me that people are going to gather there, and if they get off and they want to do something, there are things for them to do there. And
If you look at what is being developed at Town Centers today, and what is in the talks of being developed at Town Center today, you know, you would see that need today to connect it more so, you know, a more of immediate need in my mind. Anyway, yes, Amelia.
Also, the educational systems that's coming up, the Stratford, Hampton, and so forth,
Yes.
all around that town center
Yep, you're right.
with
It's
education.
tremendous. Any other comments? Yes, sir, Brandon?
One thing, and the stumbling block I've had getting over is the people who say it needs to go to the airport, it needs to go to the Downhampton Boulevard or Uphampton Boulevard to the naval base. And the question is, where does this interchange point come? And Jim makes a great point, and I love this picture. This really doesn't depend on something that's happening outside the borders of the city of Virginia Beach. This is really gonna be a self-defining system. And whether that green turns into maglev or light rail or something we don't know about yet, it really is something that we have control over, and we're not dependent on Norfolk doing something to the airport or Chesapeake doing something that's gonna tie into us somewhere. That really changes the game as far as I'm concerned.
Very good. All right. Mr. Vice Mayor, can you get us through this agenda? I've got a vision.
We're gonna hold you accountable.
Okay.
If we didn't have a budget to do today, we'd be out here.
Sorry, everybody.
Little cliff notes.
Under ordinances and resolutions, there's just a change, item I under 4, Seaside Galley will no longer be included, and we have a alternate, resolution there that we'll put into the record, but all the rest of them will be included.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't follow you.
Item I, 4I, under ordinances and resolutions.
I got you now. Thank you.
That's
Got it.
not included in it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Vice Mayor, I'll need to abstain from I'll probably just abstain from the whole one, I guess.
From what?
I'll abstain from that particular vote.
4,
Or F.
4F.
4F.
Barbara?
On item 5, I'm asking that be deferred to our next meeting, which is April 8th. This sort of was a surprise to me, and I really need to talk with all those folks the folks who did oppose it, send in opposing letters and so forth. This wasn't something that went through the planning commission, it's just kind of up to us. So we could defer that to April 8th.
Okay.
John?
We have speakers on K1A. Oh, no, did I jump? I'm sorry. I thought we talked.
I see.
On,
What?
okay, well, I'm voting no on dogs on
Used guns and all that sort of thing.
dogs on the boardwalk.
It's really on the board.
I know, it says boardwalk. I'm voting no on that.
Yeah, you are.
Yes.
Okay.
I thought there might be speakers, but
Okay, the on the gun,
Is that item 6?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about that, Mr. Mayor?
certainly.
The city attorney. In 12 years, I've never seen something like this, so I don't know, maybe y'all have, but
Never have.
can you explain to me what this is, Mark?
Yes, sir. This is for an employee who seeks to work in a pawn shop. They have to have a secondhand dealer permit to do that. Those permits are issued by the chief of police typically. If, however, the applicant has a felony conviction or a misdemeanor conviction involving a crime of moral turpitude, the police chief may not grant that permit. And so it has to come to you for your consideration, and you, the council, in the exercise of your sound discretion, can either grant it or deny it. These do not typically come up because typically the applicant doesn't choose to pursue the denial, but this applicant has, and this applicant wants to come and speak to you and
She's coming to
explain why she believes it should be granted.
So this is not somebody who's operating a pawn shop, it's somebody who's just a simple employee of a pawn shop?
Yes,
So every employee of a pawn shop has to pass this test?
yes.
Interesting, okay. I had no idea.
Okay, so 6 will be pulled.
Okay, any other ones, anybody has any comments on?
Yes, sir, please. As I did with the planning item, I have to abstain from number 2B on ordinances and resolutions, Air Station General, LC.
All right. All right. Under, did you say under planning?
No, I said as I did under the planning item, but this is under
That was last
ordinance
week, a couple weeks
K.
ago.
K, ordinances, resolutions, 2B,
Okay,
1889
okay.
Virginia Beach Boulevard
Okay.
for Air Station General.
All right. Under planning, Alicia Emnon and the Princess Anne. Ms. Henley.
I've heard no opposition. So,
To historic Kempsville, we're to defer those to April the 22nd.
Right, and I.
So you want to defer it all then, right?
The lawyer, and that's fine. So have it deferred.
Okay, that's it.
You've done a nice job.
Yeah, it took a lot of work.
But you're the man who can get it done, Mr. Vice Mayor. The chair will entertain a motion to recess into a closed session pursuant to the exemptions from open meetings allowed by Section 2.2-3711A Code of Virginia as amended for the following purposes. Personnel matters, discussion, consideration of, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A1, council appointments, council boards, commissions, committees, authorities, agencies, and appointees. Public contract, discussion of the award of a public contract involving the expenditure of public funds and discussion of the terms or scope of such contract where discussion in an open session would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A30, contracts regarding extending light rail into Virginia Beach. Publicly held property, discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for public purpose or the disposition of publicly held property where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3, acquisition and disposition of city property, Lynn Haven District, Beach District. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Call the roll, please.
Dr. Dyer?
Aye.
Ms. Henley?
Aye.
Ms. Hayes?
Yeah, aye.
Mr. Martin?
Aye.
Mr. Moore?
Aye.
Dr. O'Hara?
Aye.
Stern?
Aye.
Wilson?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.